Alongside the White Scars, whose video has just gone up, the Iron Hands also got a new detachment and a brand new character to go along with it. For them, it is the Hammer of Avernii detachment, which surprisingly doesn't take its inspiration from the Ironstorm spearhead like I think most people thought it would. Instead, this is another detachment which takes a page out of the first company task force. The new character is the Iron Captain Kenavar, who is a hefty Terminator character that can of course join Terminators and Assault Terminators, and he does bring some very nice bonuses to them, as well as to the main detachment, like we saw with Subaten Khan. First up, as ever, we'll look at Kenavar. He is, for just 100 points, a Toughness 5, 6 wound character with a 2-up save and a 4-up invuln, so he's fairly tanky. He is only a 5-inch move, so he's not the fastest character out there, but like other Terminator characters, he can of course deep strike. He does also have a native 5-up Feel No Pain, so even against some scary precision attacks that may come his way, or if he's off on his own, he can still last a good long while. His only ranged weapon is his Stormbolter. It's not even named or anything, it's not special, it is just a standard, fairly unimpressive Stormbolter. But in melee, he does have that huge power maul. This is called Axiom, and it can be swung in either a strike or a sweep profile. The sweep profile allows you to throw out 10 strength 5 minus 2 AP 1 damage swings against hordes, or you can instead put a fairly scary 5 attacks at strength 8 minus 2 AP and 2 damage into more elite targets. Honestly, it's not the best weapon, especially when you consider how big and chunky and menacing it looks. I was expecting it to be a lot stronger or have more damage. I also thought maybe it might only be minus 1 AP due to being, the big maul rather than a sword or a lance. I thought it was going to be something like strength 10, minus 1 AP and a flat 3 damage, which I'll be honest, I think I would have preferred over the profile it does have. But in any case, that's what he's got, that's what he has to use. He does get a bit more use out of it thanks to his rule Cold and Calculating, which grants him and his unit lethal hits against monsters or vehicles, or if they target any other type of unit, they instead get sustained hits. So he and his fellow Terminators can be a bit more effective into anything they go into, getting some auto wounds onto those tough targets, or instead getting some extra hits into hordes of enemies. That will allow your Power Fists and his Power Maul to just cleave through things a bit more efficiently. His other rule is Cerebrex's Logic Engine, which has a very, very cool name and is also really rather good. This allows him to pick an infantry unit in the Declare Battle Formation step, and you give it to the Scout's 6-inch rule. So his units of Terminators, they could be the target for this, so you could get them 6 inches further up the board to go and grab an objective, or maybe try and get an earlier charge off perhaps. It is very, very useful. What he can also do with this rule, after both players have deployed, is pick a unit from your army and redeploy it. So potentially messing up some enemy counter deployment or anything like that. You can also use this to put a unit into strategic reserves. So a unit that you maybe put down to bait some enemy firepower, you can then just whip out the way and leave your opponent's unit potentially exposed with no good targets. So it's a very, very strong, very powerful rule. I would argue the Logic Engine is the strongest part of his datasheet, and it really can make him a tricky character for the enemy to sort of plan around and deal with. In terms of the detachment itself, as mentioned, it is an updated take on the first company task force. It has a slightly altered Oath of Moment rule. Calculated Annihilation allows you to reroll wound rolls of 1 against your Oath of Moment target. Now, the rule from the main detachment of the first company task force, that instead gives you full rerolls, but it's only once per game. So yes, this is definitely a lot less powerful on that one go turn, but arguably it is better over the course of the game because you are always getting the reroll ones turn after turn after turn against your oath target. It is essentially the same rule as the Imperial Fist detachment get, but this one does get a unique second part, like the Fists did with Lysander. For this detachment though, it allows you once per battle round, after your Oath of Moment target is destroyed, and if Kenavar is on the battlefield, to pick a visible enemy unit to Kenavar, and then that becomes your second Oath target. And that is actually fairly good. If you, use your Oath of Moment target to target a vehicle and then destroy it, you can then set the unit that got out of that vehicle perhaps as your second Oath target, and have some follow-up shooting go into the squad that was inside. So it does have some potential. It can be really nice to essentially get a second oath target that you can shoot into and get some reroll hits and reroll wound rolls of 1. The downside is that, of course, if Kenavar dies, you lose this bonus. But it's not bad. Overall, between calculated annihilation and the recalculating rule, I would say this is probably better than the main extremist level threat rule that the base First Company Task Force does get. The enhancements also, unsurprisingly, copy some of the main detachment ones, with the Spiritus Ferrum being the Imperium Sword. This gives the bearer +1 attacks, and once per battle giving +1 attack to the bearer's unit as well, which for 25 points is quite spicy. If you put it on a character that joins some Terminators or Blade Guard veterans, you can turn them into an incredibly punchy unit for that important combat turn. Medusan Raw is an aura that is a 30-point upgrade like the Fear Made Manifest enhancement from the main detachment. Again, this one means if an enemy unit fails a battle shock test within 6 inches of the bearer, a model from that enemy unit is destroyed. And then once per battle, you can instead choose for this to be D3 models. So you could kill off 3 Terminators or 3 Custodes if you got super lucky with this. So it's potentially very strong. It is unfortunately also a bit unreliable, relying on the battle shock test failure, and also at 30 points, it's definitely not cheap. But this, if you are lucky with it, could easily get its points back in a single turn. The Iron Laurel is a 10-point one. This brings the same benefit as Rites of War. It allows you to improve the OC of the bearer by 1, and then once per battle it gives the bearer's entire unit +1 OC to their models. So quite cheap and cheerful. It's very good for helping you to flip or steal an objective, so it does have a lot of potential on a unit that you are maybe going to be moving into the midfield and fighting over those important objectives. And at 10 points, I think it's quite easy to just throw it into a list if you have some spare points left over. So this one I do actually quite like. I think it's very understated, but can really help you win games. The final enhancement is Steel Font. This one is 15 points, and I do actually really like it. It's essentially a mini apothecary. It can only go on a Terminator model, but in your command phase, you can return a bodyguard model to the bearer's unit. So this is potentially, best case scenario, getting you 5 Terminators back over the course of the game. So that, as I said, potential wise, it's huge. But even if this just gets you 1 Terminator back across the entire game, it has paid for itself. So I do really like it. And I think if you were maybe wanting to bring a massive big squad of 10 Terminators with a character, this one is mandatory. Now I get Terminators aren't in a great spot right now, so that's maybe not the most competitive option, which does limit this enhancement. But if you wanted that big blob of Terminators, this is an easy take if you are putting a character with them. Now we move on to the strats. Of course, we do have Armor of Contempt again. We won't discuss that any further here because we've all heard about it again and again, but it's a really solid strat. It is incredibly good in this detachment on a big unit of Terminators that you can also potentially be getting 1 back in your command phase. That is a unit that really will just not die. Next up, we have Ruthless Butchery. This grants a Terminator, Sternguard, Vanguard, or Dreadnought unit from your army in the shooting or the fight phase, +1 to their hit rolls, and also +1 to their wound rolls if they are below starting strength. So even just taking 1 wound or losing 1 model can massively boost the output of a unit here, and it can turn things like Assault Terminators into absolute terrors against almost any target. But even on the shooting side of thing, I think this can be really good, making something like your Ballistus Dreadnoughts much more impactful, hitting on 2s, re-rolling, and then getting +1 to wound on things like your las cannons and your missiles can actually make the Ballistus a pretty hard-hitting anti-tank platform with this stratagem. Dominator Beacon, that is again for your Dreadnoughts, Terminators, Sternguard or Vanguard units. In your movement phase, this allows one of those units to sticky an objective. Always solid to have. Being able to keep control of those objectives, to keep scoring you primary as the game goes on, is such an underrated tool. And if nothing else, this strat for 1 command point will just help you win games. So it's definitely one to keep in your mind and use as often as you can. For another command point, we've got Cogitated Ferocity. This is again on the same selection of units, so your Dreadnoughts, your Terminators or your veteran units. This in the fight phase gives your unit either sustained or lethal hits. So getting some lethal hits on your Vanguard or Blade Guard veterans is really good. Even Assault Terminators with their Thunderhammers can be made much scarier with either of those options, to be honest. I do think it's a shame it's fight phase only because Stern Guard would love some sustained hits, but I guess that might make them a bit too terrifying with their dev wound potential, but still a very good strat. And on things like your Dreadnoughts, your Terminators and your Vanguard veterans, this will be one that you will use pretty much every combat phase, I would have thought. Augmetic Fortitude is a more defensive strat. This is done in the enemy charge phase. If they charge a Dreadnought or again one of your veteran units, you can use this, and then until the end of the turn, you subtract 1 from any incoming damage. So potentially dropping 3 damage attacks into a Redempted Dreadnought down to just 1. It is really good, even on things like your Blade Guard and your Terminators. It just makes them so much tankier. You can essentially make mini Deathwing Knights with your Assault Terminators with this, so it really will help them stick around a lot longer so they can swing back into the enemy and kill off a load of your opponent's models. The last stratagem for this detachment is Dropship Extraction. This is another uppy down strat that we've seen a lot in the game recently. At the end of the enemy fight phase, a Terminator unit can be put back into reserves. So this is Terminator units only. But what's really good about this is that you can put them back into reserves, and then of course Terminators having Deep Strike in your following movement phase, you can bring them back really anywhere on the board that's 9 inches from enemies. So you can use this to get a lot of extra mobility from your Terminators to either threaten some objectives or just get them in the enemy backfield for some secondary play, or just even with regular Terminators, get down to do some shooting into maybe a screen or some chaff unit or something. It's really handy to have, and as I said earlier, although Terminator units aren't that great at the moment, if you do want to bring them, this is really good for getting a bit more mobility out of them, which is an area where they do tend to struggle. I think overall I would say this detachment maybe isn't as exciting as the Spearpoint Task Force, or maybe even as good as the Imperial Fist version, which is based off the same detachment, but it definitely does have some potential. I think if Games Workshop just made Terminators a little bit better, this would get a lot more power from it. As I said, there are some things that this detachment does make really good. Your Redempted Dreadnoughts love this, and I would say even the Ballistus or the Brutalis Dreadnoughts can benefit a lot from the detachment rule and some of the strats in this detachment. As I said earlier, getting a Ballistus Dreadnought with +1 to hit and +1 to wound, and also re-rolling hit rolls and re-rolling wound rolls of 1 does make them incredibly strong. Yes, maybe still not quite as good as something like a Lancer, but it does make them a worthy consideration, I think. And getting all of those buffs as well as maybe the sustained hits from Cogitated Ferocity on something like a Brutalis or a Redemptor can turn them into genuinely quite scary melee threats as well. So I do like it. I think there are definitely better detachments out there. But again, if you like the Iron Hands, if you like Terminators, Veteran Squads and Dreadnoughts and that kind of thing, then this detachment for me is a pretty clear winner over the generic First Company Task Force, and it could be very much worth giving a go, especially if you want to get Kenavar and have him leading the charge. As always though, I'd love to know what you think and whether you have been using this detachment and how it's been performing for you, and also whether you think it is better or worse than the generic First Company Task Force. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and as always, thank you very much for watching. Please do like and subscribe for more Warhammer content from me, but until next time, I'll catch you later guys.